This video is going to cover the component cause model to disease causation. So central to the component cause model is the idea that for disease to occur, it's a combination of host-related factors, agent-related factors, and agent is like the pathogen, like the bacteria or the virus or whatever, and your environment. So basically, all of these play a role in whether someone gets the disease. So the host factors are generally about susceptibility. So factors that make you susceptible to getting the disease, like if it's a disease related to age, you need to be of the right age. Or if it's a disease that affects only certain sexes or certain races or something, then all of a sudden you have this susceptibility criteria that's host specific. Agent factors are things like how virulent the agent is, the life cycle and life requirements, where if some of these things aren't met, then the agent can't thrive and it can't cause disease. Also, environment plays a role where some agents are only in certain environments. Some hosts and agents only come into contact in certain environments, or they might need a certain seasonal condition, like the common cold does better in the cold. And also social factors, like how HIV kind of requires something like unprotected sex or sharing needles, some social facilitator of infection. So I have an agricultural background, so the example that came most naturally to me is mastitis. That's an infection of the udder that happens to cows sometimes that are milking or of milking age. So some host-related factors are like age. The older a cow is, the both more generally producing more milk and also lower immune response. So higher susceptibility. Higher plane of nutrition is more protective against mastitis because you can mount a better response when you're well fed, and also the amount of milk you're producing. Agent factors are like what agent it is. So there's a couple different causes of mastitis, and also some can be drug resistant. And environmental factors are things in the cow's environment, like such as how clean the milking parlor is, what the milking practices are, like whether I don't think anyone does it by hand really anymore, but what the equipment is that's doing the milking, and what methods they're using to clean the udders following milking, basically, which is common practice, but there's different techniques on how you can do it. And each of these factors intersect. So an intersection between the host and the agent is whether the host has previously been exposed and might have mounted some kind of immunity that can carry them forward and protect them against future encounters with that agent. The agent and the environment, an example of that intersection is temperature. I kind of described it earlier, where sometimes the agent can only flourish in a certain temperature, which is provided by the environment. And host and environment, some breeds do better in different environments, and geographically some breeds are more prevalent. So that's an example of the host interacting with their environment, and all of these things combine to basically decide whether a cow gets mastitis. So when one cow gets mastitis and one cow doesn't, it's a combination of all of these factors that led to that, rather than just this is present, this agent, and it's going to cause disease. Some cows are more susceptible, and some environments are more conducive to that. There's notable exceptions that don't necessarily involve an agent, things like genetic predisposition and a gene times environment interaction. You could, if you wanted, you could probably include the gene itself as the agent, stuff like that. Also, the agent doesn't need to be a bacteria or a virus. It can be a chemical you come into contact with, like something toxic. The agent can be a physical trauma, like falling or something like that. It can also be nutritional, whether you're having too much or not enough of some nutrient. And this is kind of elaboration on the I don't know if I said this, but this is the epi-triad. I think I said that right away, but if I haven't yet, that's what we refer to this as. But yeah, an elaboration on that is is for vector-borne diseases, where it really brings it all together, where a vector, something like a mosquito. And if a mosquito, for example, is necessary to promote malaria, I think it's part of the. It might be necessary or sufficient. I forget that terminology will come up in a second, but yeah, let's just say for argument that it's necessary for malaria to pass through a vector to get to a host. That relies on all of these things. So whether the host is wearing like protective, like a long sleeve everything, and the mosquito can't get to them as well. The agent is interacting with the vector that the mosquito doesn't have malaria, but the malaria is in the mosquito. And the environment, that's the right environment needs to be conducive for a mosquito to thrive, and the agent, I guess. And also the reason the host is in that environment might be related to their susceptibility in some way. But basically the strongest one is just the amount of vector in the environment and the amount of agent are going to all be related to the host's likelihood of encountering a vector that has the agent. So I said it before, a necessary cause, this is where I'm going to formally define it, is it always needs to be present for the disease to occur. Like HIV infection can't happen without the HIV virus. And although there's many different component causes, the necessary cause needs to be part of every one of those separate component causes. The necessary cause will play some role. A sufficient cause always produces the disease when it's present. And a component cause is one of multiple factors that can combine to cause to create a sufficient cause. So as far as combinations of being necessary and sufficient, something that's necessary but not sufficient means that it needs to be there for the disease to happen, but it's not enough on its own. So you need to have the HIV virus to get AIDS, but the existence of that virus in your environment is not enough. You also need to be engaging in some risky activity like unprotected sex or sharing needles. If something's not necessary, but it is sufficient, that basically means that it can cause the disease on its own, but it's not the only thing that can cause it. So smoking alone, if you smoke enough, can cause lung cancer, but there's also plenty of other occupational exposures that can also cause lung cancer. So it's not necessary to smoke to get lung cancer, but it can do it on its own, so it's sufficient. For the combinations of yes, yes, and no, no, I couldn't come up with disease examples, and what I found online was more just like non-disease examples, so I'm going to use those. So as far as something that's necessary and sufficient, it needs to be there for you to have the disease. It also is enough on its own to cause or to for you to know or for the disease to occur. Oh yeah, it's conceptually slippery. So this one's more of like a logic problem than a disease relationship. So knowing it's not a Saturday or a Sunday is both necessary and sufficient to know it's a weekday. So knowing that it's not Saturday or Sunday, you need to know that to be confident that it's a weekday, and also it's the only thing you need to know. Because if it's not Saturday or Sunday, there's only one other thing it can be, which is a weekday. As far as something that's not necessary or sufficient, that means that this factor isn't enough to, it doesn't need to be there every time for the outcome to happen, and it's also not enough on its own. So being the smartest in a class isn't necessary or sufficient to get the highest grade. You can not be the smartest, but prepared really well, and that would be a reason you could get the outcome. And also, if you're smart, even if you, that's being smart is not being necessary, where you can not be the smartest, but you can study hard and get the highest grade. It's also not sufficient to just be the smartest, because if you don't study at all, even though you're the smartest, you probably won't get the highest grade. So now just illustrating the component cause model and some of its application to public health. We have these three situations where the disease would occur, and you can look at these A, B, C, D, E as different exposures or situations. Like if it's HIV, like say that like A is maybe the agent being present, the HIV virus, as well as I don't know, the like activity that you're engaging in, like sharing needles. That would be an example of these two constituting a sufficient cause. Um, so these are three separate sufficient causes that are made up of components. But you can see that A is present in everyone, so A is necessary for disease to occur, and B, C, D, and E all, like E here occurs twice, but it also doesn't, there's a situation where disease can occur where E isn't present, so E isn't necessary. And also, nothing here is sufficient because there's no circle that's all one color. Yeah, so if we were to find a way to eliminate A, we'd be able to eliminate all disease in this scenario, where we might be pouring money into eliminating a little bit of C, a little bit of B, and a little bit of A. But that would be wasteful, because if this is the true nature of the cause of this disease, there's no point in eliminating C and B for that purpose, because eliminating A takes care of each of these sufficient causes. You can also, if you're somehow able to figure out that this circle here is the reason that 50% of people who get the disease got the disease, and you have 25% for these other two causes. If we found a way to eliminate C, we'd be able to eliminate 50% of diseases with that one intervention. Although, if we're able to eliminate B, then we eliminate this cause and this one, so we're able to eliminate 75% of disease.